The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Marcus Johnson sat on the porch of his modest home, sipping a cup of tea as he watched the neighborhood settle into its nightly rhythm. The air was cool, carrying with it the faint scent of blooming flowers from Mrs. Carter's garden next door. It was one of those rare moments when everything felt calm, almost perfect. Marcus was a man who carried himself with quiet dignity. At 38 years old, he had earned respect not only within his community, but far beyond it. He worked tirelessly to uplift others, often spending weekends organizing food drives or mentoring young people at the local youth center. His deep voice and warm smile made him approachable, someone you could trust without hesitation. But tonight all he wanted was some time to himself, a break from the constant demands of helping everyone else. As he leaned back in his chair, the soft glow of the streetlights began to flicker on, casting long shadows across the pavement. The sound of laughter drifted over from down the block, where children were still playing tag despite the fading light. Marcus chuckled softly, remembering how much he used to love that game as a kid. For once, life seemed simple, but simplicity has a way of being fleeting. A sudden commotion broke through the tranquility. Tires screeched against asphalt as two police cars sped down the otherwise quiet street, their sirens wailing like an unwelcome alarm clock. Marcus frowned, setting his teacup aside. Something about this didn't feel right. Why would they be here? This wasn't exactly a high-crime area. Before he could process what was happening, the flashing red and blue lights came to an abrupt halt right outside his house. 4 officers emerged quickly, their faces tense and focused. One of them held a clipboard, while another spoke urgently into a radio. Marcus stood up slowly, confusion etched across his face. "Sir?" one officer called out sharply. "Please step away from the house." Marcus raised both hands slightly, palms open, showing he meant no harm. "Is there a problem?" he asked calmly, though his heart had started racing. "I live here." Without answering, the officers moved closer, surrounding him. Their body language screamed suspicion, their eyes scanning him as if expecting him to make a wrong move. Marcus noticed the neighbors peeking out of their windows now, curiosity turning to concern as they realized what was unfolding. "What's going on?" Marcus repeated, louder this time. His mind raced. Had there been a mistake? Was someone impersonating him? Or worse, had someone accused him of something he hadn't done? One of the officers stepped forward, gripping handcuffs tightly in his hand. "You're under arrest," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Marcus froze, disbelief washing over him. "Arrested? For what?" he demanded, his voice rising slightly. "I haven't done anything." The officer ignored his question, instead repeating the command more forcefully. Reluctantly, Marcus complied, his mind swirling with questions and fear. As the cold metal of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, he couldn't help but glance toward the crowd of onlookers gathering nearby. Some looked shocked, others simply stared, unsure of what to think. In that moment, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: vulnerability. Here he was, a man who had spent his entire adult life fighting for justice, fairness, and equality. And yet, none of that mattered now. All anyone saw was a black man in handcuffs, guilty until proven innocent. As the officers led him toward the patrol car, Marcus locked eyes briefly with little Jamal, one of the kids he mentored at the youth center. The boy's wide, frightened gaze said it all. Why is this happening to Mr. Marcus? For Marcus, that look cut deeper than any accusation ever could. This sets the stage for the story, introducing Marcus as a respected figure whose world is suddenly turned upside down by an unexpected arrest. The tension builds naturally, drawing readers into the mystery of why this happened and what will come next. The ride to the police station was tense and silent. Marcus sat in the back seat of the patrol car, his hands still cuffed behind him. The cold metal dug into his wrists, but it wasn't the physical discomfort that weighed on him. It was the overwhelming sense of injustice. He stared out the window, as familiar streets blurred past, each passing moment making him feel more like a stranger in his own life. When they arrived at the station, Marcus was led inside with little explanation. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the room. Officers moved about briskly, their voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony of radio chatter and clattering keyboards. Marcus felt small amidst the chaos, invisible, yet scrutinized all at once. "Sit here," one of the officers barked, pointing to a hard plastic chair near a desk cluttered with papers and coffee cups. Marcus obeyed silently, taking in his surroundings. His mind raced, trying to piece together what had gone wrong. Had someone mistaken him for someone else? Was there a case of identity theft he didn't know about? Or was this something darker, something rooted in prejudice? Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. No one spoke to him directly, though several officers shot him wary glances as they passed by. Finally, a tall man with graying hair approached, wearing a badge that identified him as Detective Harris. His expression was stern, but there was also a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "Marcus Johnson," Detective Harris began, flipping open a file folder. "Do you know why you're here?" Marcus shook his head firmly. "No, sir, I don't. And I'd appreciate an explanation." Detective Harris studied him for a moment before responding. "We received a report about a suspect matching your description involved in a robbery earlier today. Witnesses described a black man approximately 6 feet tall wearing dark clothing. That matches you, doesn't it?" Marcus blinked, stunned. "That's not enough to arrest someone. Half the men in this city fit that vague description. Besides, I was at home all day. I have witnesses who can confirm that." Harris raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "We'll see about that. In the meantime, we need to verify your alibi." As Harris walked away, Marcus slumped slightly in his seat, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. How could this be happening? He thought of his work at the youth center, the countless hours he'd spent teaching kids about responsibility and integrity. Now, he was sitting in a police station, accused of something he hadn't done, simply because he happened to look like someone else. Hours ticked by as Marcus waited for answers. Eventually, another officer came over to take his fingerprints and mugshot, a humiliating process that made him feel less like a person and more like a statistic. Each click of the camera shutter echoed loudly in his ears, a reminder of how quickly reputations could be tarnished. Despite the mounting frustration, Marcus tried to stay calm. He knew losing his temper wouldn't help. Instead, he focused on finding solutions. When Detective Harris returned, Marcus leaned forward earnestly. "Look, I understand you're just doing your job, but I'm innocent. Call my neighbor, Mrs. Carter. She saw me on my porch tonight. Or check my phone records. I've been talking to friends and colleagues all evening. This is a mistake." Harris nodded slowly, jotting down notes. "We'll look into it," he said, though his tone suggested skepticism. Still, Marcus held on to hope. If they investigated further, surely the truth would come out. But then, something unexpected happened. As Harris turned to leave, a junior officer rushed up to him, whispering urgently. Whatever the news was, it changed Harris's demeanor instantly. His face went pale, and he glanced back at Marcus with wide eyes. "Wait here," Harris muttered, hurrying off without another word. For the first time since his arrest, Marcus felt a flicker of optimism. Something had shifted. He could see it in the way the officers now looked at him. What had they discovered? And how would it change everything? This part deepens the mystery while highlighting Marcus's resilience and determination to clear his name. It ends on a cliffhanger, keeping readers engaged and eager to learn what shocking revelation awaits. Detective Harris returned to the room with hurried steps, his face pale and his expression unreadable. Behind him trailed another officer clutching a folder, its edges worn as if it had been handled many times before. Marcus sat upright in his chair, his heart pounding. Something had clearly changed. Harris's usual stern demeanor was replaced by an almost nervous energy. "Mr. Johnson," Harris began, his voice quieter than before. "We need to ask you some additional questions." Marcus raised an eyebrow, trying to mask his growing unease. "What kind of questions?" he asked cautiously. "And can someone finally tell me why I'm here? This has gone far enough." Harris hesitated, glancing down at the folder in his hands. Then, after a deep breath, he spoke. When we ran your fingerprints through the system, well, they didn't match any criminal records. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But they did match something else. Something significant. Marcus frowned, confusion clouding his features. What are you talking about? The detective exchanged a glance with the other officer, who nodded slightly. Harris opened the folder and pulled out a document. On it was a photo. A younger Marcus, dressed in formal attire, standing beside several high-ranking officials. It was unmistakably him, though the setting was unfamiliar. This photo was taken at a White House event 5 years ago, Harris explained, his tone now tinged with disbelief. You were honored for your humanitarian work overseas. Your name isn't just Marcus Johnson. It's Dr. Marcus Johnson, recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Marcus blinked, stunned. While this revelation wasn't news to him, hearing it from Detective Harris felt surreal. He had always kept his accomplishments low-key, preferring to focus on his community rather than bask in past accolades. But now, those achievements were about to change everything. The officers stared at him, their earlier suspicion giving way to awe, and perhaps even guilt. One of them muttered under his breath, "We messed up big time." Harris cleared his throat, looking visibly uncomfortable. "Dr. Johnson, I apologize for the misunderstanding. Clearly there's been a grave error. We'll begin processing your release immediately." But Marcus wasn't ready to let it go so easily. "A grave error?" he repeated, his voice steady but firm. "You arrested me based on a vague description and no evidence. Do you have any idea how damaging this could be? Not just for me, but for anyone who looks like me? What if I hadn't received that award? Would you still be accusing me right now?" Harris shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. "Sir, I understand your frustration and you're absolutely right. This shouldn't have happened. We'll make sure proper measures are taken to prevent something like this in the future." As the officers scrambled to process his release, Marcus leaned back in his chair, letting the weight of the situation sink in. He thought about all the people who wouldn't have had the same outcome, those without prestigious awards or connections to vouch for them. For every Marcus Johnson, there were countless others whose lives were derailed by similar mistakes. The injustice burned within him, fueling a renewed determination to fight for change. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus was handed back his belongings and escorted to the front door of the station. Reporters had gathered outside, tipped off by someone inside the precinct. Cameras flashed and microphones were thrust toward him as journalists shouted questions. "Dr. Johnson, what happened tonight? How do you feel about being wrongfully detained? What message do you have for law enforcement?" Marcus took a deep breath, centering himself. Despite the exhaustion weighing on him, he knew this moment mattered. Stepping forward, he addressed the crowd calmly but firmly. "I stand here today not as a victim, but as proof that our justice system needs reform," he said, his voice carrying strength despite the circumstances. "No one should be treated as guilty until proven innocent. Tonight showed me that while titles and recognition may open doors, true equality comes when everyone is seen as human first. Let's work together to build a world where this doesn't happen again." His words resonated deeply, drawing murmurs of agreement from the crowd. As he walked away, flanked by supporters who had arrived to show solidarity, Marcus felt a mix of emotions: anger, relief, and resolve. This ordeal wasn't over yet. In fact, it was only beginning. The days following Marcus's release were a whirlwind of media attention and public outrage. News outlets across the country picked up his story, turning it into a national conversation about racial profiling and systemic injustice. Headlines blared phrases like "Presidential Medal," "Recipient wrongfully arrested and justice system fails community leader." Social media platforms buzzed with hashtags like "Justice for Marcus" and "Equality Now," amplifying calls for reform. Despite the growing spotlight, Marcus remained grounded. He knew this moment wasn't just about him, it was about all the people who didn't have a voice. Sitting in his living room, surrounded by stacks of letters from supporters and invitations to speak at rallies, Marcus felt both overwhelmed and inspired. This was an opportunity to spark real change, but he also knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. One afternoon, as he sifted through the pile of mail, a letter caught his eye. It was handwritten, its envelope worn and creased. Inside, a young boy named Jamal, his mentee from the youth center, had written, "Dear Mr. Marcus, I saw you on TV. You looked so brave. My mom says you're teaching everyone how to fix things. I want to help too when I grow up. Thank you for showing us that we can make a difference." Tears welled in Marcus's eyes as he read the note. It reminded him why he did what he did. Not for fame or recognition, but to inspire hope in others. He carefully folded the letter and placed it on his desk, vowing to keep Jamal's words close to his heart. Later that week, Marcus attended a town hall meeting organized by local activists. The room was packed with residents eager to hear his thoughts on moving forward. As he stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted into applause. Marcus raised a hand, signaling for quiet, and began to speak. "This isn't just my fight," he said, his voice steady yet passionate. "It's our fight. What happened to me happens every day to countless others who don't have awards or titles to protect them. We need accountability, transparency, and education within law enforcement, and beyond. But more importantly, we need compassion. Compassion is what will bridge the gaps between us." His words resonated deeply, earning nods and murmurs of agreement from the audience. After the speech, several community leaders approached him offering their support. Among them was Sarah Thompson, a prominent civil rights attorney known for her work on high-profile cases. "Dr. Johnson," she began, extending her hand, "I'd like to offer my services to help you take legal action against the department. This isn't just about justice for you, it's about setting a precedent for future cases." Marcus hesitated. He hadn't considered suing the police department. His focus had been on advocacy rather than litigation. But as he thought about it, he realized the power of leading by example. If he pursued legal action, it could force meaningful policy changes that would benefit others. "I'll think about it," he replied, shaking her hand. "But let's not lose sight of the bigger picture. Lawsuits are important, but they're not enough. We need grassroots efforts, education programs, and open dialogues. Real change starts with understanding." Sarah nodded, impressed by his vision. "You're right. Let's work together to tackle this from all angles." As the weeks passed, Marcus threw himself into organizing workshops and seminars aimed at fostering trust between communities and law enforcement. He partnered with schools, churches, and local organizations to create safe spaces where people could share their experiences and brainstorm solutions. His efforts gained momentum, drawing volunteers and donors eager to contribute. But not everyone was supportive. Some critics accused Marcus of using his ordeal for personal gain, while others dismissed his initiatives as naive idealism. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings, Marcus found himself sitting alone on his porch staring at the stars. For the first time since his arrest, doubt crept in. Was he doing enough? Could one person truly make a difference? Just then, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jamal's mother. "Jamal hasn't stopped talking about you all week. He says you're his hero. Keep going, Dr. Johnson. The world needs more people like you." A smile spread across Marcus's face. Maybe he couldn't fix everything overnight, but he could plant seeds of hope and watch them grow. As Marcus's advocacy work gained momentum, so did the resistance. Not everyone was ready to embrace change, and some pushed back with surprising intensity. Critics began to emerge, some openly hostile, others subtly undermining his efforts. Local newspapers ran opinion pieces questioning his motives, while anonymous online trolls spread baseless rumors about him seeking fame or financial gain. Even within the community he sought to uplift, a few voices expressed skepticism, fearing that rocking the boat might make things worse. One chilly morning, Marcus arrived at the youth center to find graffiti scrawled across its front wall. "Stay in your lane." The bold red letters stood out starkly against the pale bricks, sending a clear message of intimidation. Marcus clenched his fists as he stared at the vandalism, anger simmering beneath the surface. But instead of letting it discourage him, he saw it as proof that his work was hitting a nerve. And that meant he was on the right track. Later that day, Marcus called an emergency meeting with his core team of volunteers. They gathered in the center's main hall, their faces reflecting a mix of frustration and determination. Marcus addressed them directly, his voice calm but resolute. "This is exactly what they want," he said, gesturing toward photos of the graffiti shared on social media. "They want us to feel afraid, to doubt ourselves, to give up. But we can't let them win. Every time they try to silence us, we'll respond by speaking louder." The group nodded in agreement, rallying behind his words. Together they organized a cleanup event, inviting neighbors, friends, and supporters to help repaint the walls. What started as an act of defiance quickly turned into a celebration of unity. By the end of the day, not only had the graffiti been erased, but vibrant murals now adorned the building, images of hope, resilience, and community painted by local artists. Despite this small victory, Marcus knew the pushback wouldn't stop there. A few days later, he received a letter from the police department informing him that no disciplinary action would be taken against the officers involved in his wrongful arrest. According to the statement, it was deemed a procedural error rather than misconduct. The news hit hard, reigniting the anger and frustration Marcus had worked so hard to channel constructively. Feeling betrayed yet again, Marcus reached out to Sarah Thompson, the civil rights attorney who had offered her support earlier. She listened intently as he vented his frustrations, then laid out a plan. "If we pursue legal action, it won't just be about holding these officers accountable," she explained. "If we pursue legal action, it won't just be about holding these officers accountable," Sarah explained, leaning forward in her chair. "It's an opportunity to shine a light on systemic flaws and demand meaningful reform. This case could set a precedent, not just for you, but for everyone who has faced similar injustices." Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He had always believed in addressing issues at their root, and Sarah was right. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about creating lasting change, even if it meant stepping into the uncomfortable spotlight of a courtroom. The decision wasn't easy. Marcus knew that filing a lawsuit would invite more scrutiny, criticism, and resistance. But he also understood the power of leading by example. If he wanted others to fight for justice, he had to be willing to do the same. With Sarah's guidance, Marcus filed a civil rights lawsuit against the police department. The move sent shockwaves through the community, reigniting debates about accountability and fairness in law enforcement. Supporters rallied around him, organizing marches and vigils to show solidarity. Meanwhile, opponents doubled down, accusing him of being divisive or self-serving. Yet Marcus remained steadfast, focusing on the bigger picture. As preparations for the trial began, Marcus found himself reflecting on his journey so far. Late one evening, as he sat alone in his study surrounded by stacks of documents and notes, he thought about how much had changed since that night of his arrest. Back then, he had felt powerless, a man stripped of dignity and agency. Now he was standing tall, using his voice to advocate for those who couldn't speak for themselves. But the road ahead was daunting. During pre-trial hearings, the defense team argued that the officers acted within protocol and that the arrest was simply a mistake. They emphasized the lack of malicious intent, attempting to downplay the severity of the situation. For Marcus, this argument missed the point entirely. It wasn't about whether the officers intended harm. It was about the consequences of their actions and the broader implications for marginalized communities. One particularly grueling day after a tense hearing, Marcus met with Sarah to discuss the case. She could see the exhaustion etched on his face, but also the fire still burning in his eyes. "You're doing the right thing," she reassured him. "This isn't just your story. It's becoming a symbol of hope for countless others. Even if the outcome isn't perfect, the fact that you're fighting back sends a powerful message." Her words struck a chord. Marcus realized that the true victory wouldn't come from winning the lawsuit. It would come from inspiring others to believe in the possibility of change. Whether the court ruled in his favor or not, He was already shifting the narrative. In No. The weeks leading up to the trial, Marcus continued his advocacy work, refusing to let the legal battle consume him. He visited schools, spoke at conferences, and collaborated with activists across the country. His message remained consistent. Progress required patience, persistence, and unity. Then came the day of the trial. As Marcus walked into the courtroom, flanked by Sarah and a small group of supporters, he felt a mix of nerves and resolve. Cameras flashed outside, capturing the historic moment. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. Reporters scribbled notes furiously while spectators filled every available seat. When the judge called the courtroom to order, Marcus took a deep breath. This was it. The culmination of months of struggle, sacrifice, and determination. Whatever happened next, he knew he had already made a difference. The courtroom was silent as the judge delivered the verdict. Marcus sat upright, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, his expression calm but alert. Sarah Thompson stood beside him, her posture confident yet respectful. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the words that would shape not only Marcus's future, but also the broader conversation about justice and accountability. The court finds, the judge began, pausing briefly as if to emphasize the gravity of the moment, that the actions taken by the officers involved in this case constituted a violation of Dr. Marcus Johnson's civil rights. While there may not have been malicious intent, the systemic failures leading to his wrongful arrest cannot be ignored. A wave of murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Supporters exchanged hopeful glances, while opponents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. For Marcus, the verdict was bittersweet. It wasn't just about vindication. It was validation that his voice mattered, that his fight had meaning. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court orders mandatory reforms within the police department, including enhanced training on racial profiling, improved oversight mechanisms, and community engagement initiatives. These measures are intended to prevent similar incidents in the future. As the gavel struck, signaling the end of the trial, Marcus exhaled deeply. He hadn't expected perfection, but he felt a sense of relief knowing that his efforts had sparked tangible change. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed him with questions, their cameras flashing like strobe lights. How do you feel about the outcome? What's next for you, Dr. Johnson? Do you think this will lead to real reform? Marcus raised a hand, asking for quiet. When the crowd settled, he spoke with the same steady tone that had inspired so many throughout his journey. This isn't just my victory, he said firmly. It belongs to every person who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or unjustly treated. Today shows us that no matter how daunting the odds, we can create change when we stand together. But let me be clear, this is only the beginning. There's still much work to be done. His words resonated deeply, earning applause from supporters and even nods of acknowledgement from some skeptics. As he walked away from the courthouse, flanked by friends, family, and allies, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The legal battle was over, but his mission to build a more equitable society had only just begun. In the weeks that followed, Marcus redoubled his efforts, working closely with policymakers, educators, and activists to implement the court-ordered reforms. He launched a mentorship program aimed at bridging gaps between law enforcement and marginalized communities, fostering trust through open dialogue and shared experiences. His advocacy reached new heights, earning invitations to speak at national conferences and collaborate with organizations dedicated to social justice. One evening, as he stood on stage addressing a packed auditorium, Marcus spotted Jamal sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. The boy's presence reminded him why he kept going, even on the hardest days. Afterward, Jamal ran up to him, clutching a small handmade card. "Thank you, Mr. Marcus," Jamal said shyly. "You're my hero." Marcus knelt down, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "No, Jamal. You're my hero. You remind me why this fight matters." That night, as Marcus returned home, he paused on his porch to look up at the stars. The road ahead would still have challenges, but he knew he wasn't alone. Change was slow, messy, and often painful, but it was possible. And Marcus Johnson was determined to keep pushing forward, one step at a time. This final part ties together the emotional and thematic threads of the story, emphasizing hope, resilience, and the power of collective action. It leaves readers inspired, reminding them that even in the face of adversity, courage and unity can pave the way for a brighter future.